Welcome to Renaissance Charge Videos. I'm Rick Friedrich. Today I have a lot to say. Not that I usually do. So we're going to talk about how you can power all your energy needs just from one of these little plasma globes. But we're not going to talk about that directly. So just finished the Don Smith Magnetic Resonance Energy Crafting Systematic Index. Completely finished it. It was very tedious, very rewarding, but it took a lot longer than I thought. Well, I included a lot more information in the book than I had originally planned. So for those of you who have ordered it or waiting, you will definitely it'll be well worth the wait. So I still have to get the physical prints. I did my own print here today, and I we'll talk about that in a minute. But first of all, for those who don't know what this is all about, this is a book, the book on free energy and over unity and related topics. This is, I would say, the most important work on energy ever produced. Not that it came from me. This is a Don Smith book, and it's very important because of his work and his contribution. I am just somebody who was formatting his information in this book, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But for those who don't know what this is about running energy systems the right way, collecting energy and using it properly. So we're going to talk about the two books that I've done and upcoming books that I want to do. And why is this important? Why is this book important? There's many reasons, and I get into that in the book. But one of the reasons is that people are floating around not knowing what to do, where they should begin, and so forth. I made a big point in this introduction of this book to talk about how thousands of people all around the world are floating around uncertain of what to do, starting up this and that project and hoping they could just find the thing that's going to solve all their problems, not just energy problems, financial problems and whatever. So this has to be addressed, this point, and that's what I do in this book. So what happens is people have been overwhelmed with information, and that's one of the reasons why they don't succeed, is they don't know how to process the information. So what I talk about in this book is coming to a foundation. I'm a foundationalist. That means you build from a solid ground. So it just so happens to parallel with the idea of proper grounding, which is one of the most important topics and one of the main reasons why people have failed to replicate Don Smith systems, is because they have not understood the ground connections and the importance of it, and of course the relation to the electron theory. So this is a book on electron theory. Don talks about it being Nobel Prize material, that it's a continuation of J.J. Thomson's work on the electron initially, and it's consistent with it. So it's not as if it's some kind of weird mystical belief that he held to. He was pretty conventional along many lines, and but he was very simple in the ideas, and of course that's all you really need to know to produce these high output systems. So he was a very down-to-earth man, helping people in ways that they could understand. So there's not a lot of complexity. In fact, the first resonance book that I published with the kit is actually, the second part of it is a lot more complex and harder to understand than this book. So I want to make that clear. But the main obstacle in the way of replicating Don's systems is failure to follow instructions, and that's what this book is about, is getting to the details, but not overwhelming you with details. There are a lot of details in here, but what I do in my introduction is I have 12 pages in here that help you understand, like we'll go over this one, that help you understand the important points. So if you don't understand the system as a whole, you're just going to be looking at parts as if these parts are the answer for you. But if you don't know what to do with these parts or how they relate to each other, then you're just guessing, and you're never really going to get anywhere, especially if you don't understand the next page on this, which is the electron cycling. So I'm not going to obviously repeat everything that's in this book, but I do want to go over some of the general ideas and just what this book consists of. So again, not understanding the details, the details that are important and the details that are not. So what I try and do is boil it down and stress those important points, and this is what's taken me a lot longer in finishing the book. The last 2 months I've been focused on trying to create these helps. So I've made quite a bit more schematics than anybody's made with the Don Smith system, and then I have labeled all the models into numbers from 1 to 31, I think, different models that have been more or less revealed in pictures and schematics and so forth. There's over maybe 100 illustrations, pictures, diagrams in this book, many of which are my new contributions that help. So, not like I'm trying to make it simple enough so that, or focused enough so that you can really grasp this. Once you go through this book, then you'll be able to take this frequency meter and go around and to various parts in your house and around, devices that are made, such as this plasma. And then you can create a collector, and then once you collect the energy, know how to collect it, and then transform it, you can use it for real power. And so this is the main point from Don Smith, was the magnetic resonance is not electrical, it's the magnetic side, and this is what's discarded in energy production systems and transfer systems and so forth, is that people, well, not so much the transfer systems, that's how they transfer energy, is through the magnetic a lot of the time. But people are focused in on the electric side, And so there's two parts to the energy, and not knowing the two different energies and how they relate to each other and how to measure them and use them is the whole reason why we're in this big mess and why you're paying for your electric. Once you understand that, which is the number one point in this book from Don, and he goes over and over in many different ways and angles, so you'll get that once you read this book. You'll fully understand that as much as you need to, and then you'll say, oh wow, this is totally different than the way I've been thinking. Even the way people have been thinking generally in the free energy communities is too convoluted, it's too involved, it's too... and so Don made it really simple. And so what I'm trying to do is stress that. I've organized all of his main ideas into what I call a systematic index. And that's where it's important to... it was important to do that because Don spoke in all these videos, which I've transcribed, and I'll talk about that in a minute. He talked about these videos, talked in these videos about this and that, and he had in his book no real beginning to end. There were booklets, which there's 4 or 5 booklets given out over the years, more or less, and he never ended up making a full presentation. I think his commercial interest prevented him from doing that, so he kind of went, stealthily by sharing this and that over here and there. And for those who are wanting to do their homework and do a course on this, they would be able to figure it all out. And you don't need to read this whole book to do that. Even the online PDF is enough for you. But again, what I have done is my homework. So this is the equivalent of doing a PhD. I took a long time. I mean, I began this after years of study in related systems, and I have spent 6 months on this, more than full time. I mean, I've gone to bed at like 4, 5, 6. Yesterday I went to bed at 8 in the morning. And so I'm absolutely exhausted in doing this, but I've worked on this and went over and over and over again, and every single detail. I haven't missed a little detail at all. And I'm very excited about it. I'm not boastful about it. I'm just excited about it that it's finally done, and it turned out way better than I was hoping for. So, just a passing note on that. No matter how many times you watch the videos or read through the book, if you don't process every word like I did, literally writing it out and organizing it and processing it as you come across it, you're going to miss it. And I did. I watched the videos 20, 30 times. And, when I finally transcribed it, which was a tedious process, I picked up about 5% of what I had lost, like I did not notice. And so there's a whole bunch of details, and I think people, I'll just jump into the point then. So one of the people that helped transcribe was from Europe, and I think he did a pretty good job, but he still probably misunderstood half of what Don was saying, because there was an English barrier, and you really have to know this to really hear some of the words he was saying, because they weren't very clearly picked up for the microphone, and he didn't quite hear every word. So I had to really go back and forth with many words, especially in the audio recording. That was the hardest because it was over the phone with Don. But anyway, what I'm getting at is I can really see now how much people have missed from Don's teaching. And I guess, like I said, it's because they're approaching it from a conventional perspective, a nonlinear perspective, where they're interpreting everything consistent with Kirchhoff's laws or rules and so forth. And so they're approaching it from that perspective. They're approaching it as if these particular parts in themselves are individual items. Like, that's another big point. As you go through this, you're going to realize that we're in an environment. The parts are not by themselves, as if you're looking at it two-dimensional. You have to think in terms of three-dimension, and also that everything's affecting each other. And I said this in my last convention in California, that like I was talking about my glasses and the problem that I've had all my life, that really, because of my eyes, I've had a very unique problem, which has caused me so many problems throughout my life, especially my early life. And once I solved that, everything changed. And so then I talked about, as if in the same way, as if you had glasses that could see all the magnetic streams and waves and fields all around you, it would change everything for everybody. If you had glasses like that, it's kind of like a certain movie where the guy puts the glasses on and he could see. Anyway, so if you could see the magnetic streams everywhere, you'd realize how much waste was going on, especially when you can use these and collect them and use them to power loads. And the other glasses, if you had maybe one lens seeing magnetic and the other seeing the capacitance relationships between objects, so that would also change quite a bit. So this is what we get into the first book, is talking about that quite a bit and showing how these induction coils can be, you can capacitively couple into different parts. And again, relating to that is what Don said, one of the main reasons why people fail to make a proper resonance circuit, the L1 and L2 relationships, is that these parts are not, these inductors are not just, they don't just have inductance, they have capacitance and resistance. And in fact, these have a lot of capacitance. The bigger the diameter, the more capacitance. So this is a factor that is so important. Now, we don't get into the specifics of that in this book, and you're going to have to understand and do some homework on your meters, LCR meters, and so forth, to properly tune these things. Now, one of the things that Don shows is how you can have adjustable tuning. And page 1 starts off with Tesla's circuits on that, a diagram showing how you can move this L1 back and forth in this case, or they had one internally. So understanding capacitance relationships, of course the magnetic relationships, and overcoming your own bias. And this is so important. This is a big part of my introduction, actually my preface in this book, is that most people, 99.9999% of the world is prejudiced, is completely biased. And it's a bold claim to make that high percentage claim. But when you look at, if you ask somebody for 5 minutes a series of questions, they'll reveal that they are biased. And we can overcome that problem, but it's an education problem, and it's a being sloppy problem. So what happens is that you just assume all the time, you know, that such and such is true, or such and such is not true, and not remain open-minded. And that's what, you know, the scientific mindset is to be truly exploratory in an open way, in which you are letting the truth teach you, bring you along. And the problem is people come into things with all sorts of baggage and assumptions. So, I mean, you got to do what you got to do with what you have, but when you're trying to, for example, replicate somebody, you have to follow their instructions. And I dealt with this with the motor systems for years, where people said it doesn't work or whatever. I mean, most of the people did make it work, but some people will come along and say it doesn't work, and then when you get down to the details, they weren't really following the instructions. They were, you know, just half-heartedly paying attention to the details. So the bias problem is, you know, you want something to be something, and you want to make it become that. And instead of learning from your failures or the results that you have and figuring out why you actually have these results, people just kind of give up, or they just jump onto something else, just hope. So they're kind of just jumping around, like I said. So you have to overcome that. And this, I wrote quite a bit about that in this book. And this led me to another book that I'll be writing in the next year, which will be the most important book most important thing probably I ever do in my life, which will be about walking either in the truth or walking in lies, and the whole, all the related subject matters. So I have to do a lot more foundational research and that, and so I hope to do that this year, which is far more important than, you know, energy-related subjects. But it relates to the energy-related subjects so much. So anyway, I don't need to go too much along those lines. So just talking a bit more about what's in the book then. So there are many color pages. Now I print this right now in black and white just to see that would work out, you know, and conform to my PDF files, my submission files for the book. I'm not going to print this myself. This was a, well, let's go over how I made this particular book. So I'm a publisher. I have published many books, about 100 different softcover and hardcover books, and I have made my own soft covers. Now, this one I just did a simple ring binding or spiral ring binding. Anyway, I've talked about that many times, so I don't need to go into my history on that. But one thing I haven't shared is, so about 15 or more years ago, I learned from a guy who actually makes books for the local government in Grand Rapids, and he had all this 100-year-old equipment, and it was fascinating. So he taught me how to create a hardcover, and so I'm going to show a couple pictures of the process just for your information. So this was just kind of slapped together real quick, and it wasn't. This is my actual cover, exactly how it's going to look, but it's not quite positioned right because I was just kind of guessing at the, well, it's a double cardboard in there, so it's a little bit thicker than it will be, so that's why it's not quite centered. Anyway, so what you create is you print up your pages and you create a book block, right? So a book block is all the pages and then they are, so what I do is, I'm going to show a picture right now. So that picture shows you the book block where what I do is I clamp the pages together, and then I cut down into the edge here. I'm not using all the names. It's been many years since I did this kind of stuff. So you cut down into the book pages that are clamped together, and then I just use the hot melt glue and put some denim on top to hold it together. And then I proceeded to put some pretty strong staples through. Now normally I would put my, if I was really want to make it strong, I would put nails all the way through. And so this is what this guy was doing and showing me. And that way, like, he was using books that were being used by thousands of people and pull it apart, so you had to really make it strong. So in doing that, I didn't quite get through all the way, so these pages aren't going to be in the very center as secure. So then what you do, the outer two pages are actually one big long page here, and I forget again the terminology here, but these thicker pages are what holds the book block to the book case. And so then you have some boards here that you wrap the cover around, and then you glue them together. And so then you usually have another piece here, and it was just too big to fit in there, so I took it out. And then, you know, it's just, you just fold these cover over and you glue them together. So anyway, that's what I did today. It was fun to do that again. I just wanted to do that for this video to show you that yes, I have indeed done the book. This is the size of it. Now the pages are bigger than these pages, so I had to add another ½ inch of paper to make it the right size of what it will be. I have to use thicker 70-pound paper for this because of the images, so that they don't. This is the problem with when I made the book. Don's original pages were photocopied on thinner paper so that you could see the other side through it. So I had to spend a great deal of time editing these images to remove some of that. And I mean, I could have gone another 2 months on it and worked on it and perfected it, but I had to just, it is what it is. It's pretty good, but you know, some people will maybe complain about it. Anyway, I had to do a lot of work and relearn the Adobe programs to get this cover figured out and do it right. So the cover turned out really nice, and so it's pretty interesting. The things on there, there's some things on here that will make you think for a while, and I wanted something that, just like this book, for you to have and you know, so in a way that you'd want to be able to stare at it for hours and days and weeks, and you know, remind you, like for example, I'm not going to tell you what the burr on the wire is about. Some of you will get it, some of you won't, and the lines around the Don Smith, you'll figure out what that means and how it's kind of pointing to the bird, and then of course the trumpet waveform underneath that. And so then I have essentially the system, the circuit, the main ideas in the circuit here represented in the lettering, with some ground coming and going. And then you have the man climbing up the ladder here, and what he's doing, just to be clear for people, is he's trying to pull the ladder up to himself. And that's what I'm talking about, having a no foundation, which is where we're at morally in this country today. But we're also in the energy world. We were trying to be willy-nilly, if you will, and trying to, we're not grounded. So electrically we're not grounded, and we're not doing Don Smith systems right, or we're not doing regular energy systems right. So this is just kind of a point that I was making, I came up with one day, and I make a point in the book about that it's like you're trying to climb up this ladder and you forget about the ground, and you're just trying to pull the ladder up to yourself so that you can climb higher, but you're not a ground in yourself. You have to be on the foundation, and the ladder is on the ground. So once you try and do that, you mess yourself up. So anyway, there's also the infinity symbol here as the S of the systematic, and the cover will make more and more sense as you go through the book. So again, the main parts of the book, I'll go over a bit here. So what we have is a very long, it's about 10 or 12 or so pages, 10 or 11 pages, no, 10 pages of table of contents. And these are 8.5 by 11 pages, so, and this is actually pretty small print for the table of contents. So what it is going over all the sections of the book and the subsections, and then what I do is actually have some commentary. I was going to do a section on endnotes, and ended up deciding on just doing it in the table of contents, which is, some people do that, and that gives you a real idea. It's kind of like another form of an index, of course, in which you can look for different things, and so you can always come back to that index, and while you're going through the book, and see if I made a comment about it, because there are definitely important comments in there. So we have a illustrations and pictures page, a models page, a preface which goes over the real important background information about where to begin, well, reasons for the publication, and specifics about Don, and that he was the real deal, that being grounded, like I said, people are looking for a trick and not a foundation, and that's a big point they make in the book. And then how I process Don's pages, and and that includes my I'm committed to letting the author speak in their own words, and the only thing that's that I did with the transcribing was impossible to get every word, because he said a lot of but. So therefore, a lot of these filler words that made it unbearable to read over and over again, those words, and there I go with my ums. When you have all these extra words, it detracts from following the points. So I got rid of all these so's, nows, okay, that were only filler words. Now, the reason why it's not critical is because you still have the videos, you can follow along in the videos, but then you will actually follow on the actual content that's significant. So anything that was talking about the setting up of the microphone and different things that didn't pertain to the matter at hand, I just removed. And that was a very tedious process. To try and get the exact wording that he said. So I didn't ever change his words, and I just removed filler words. And you can verify what you have. But as for his emails, these are very important emails, and it took me a very long time to find them all and put them together, and again, sort through the relevant ones. There was political rants that he went off on that I didn't include. There was things that it would have taken too much space for me to, like he was quoting some patent and included the whole patent in the email. I'm not going to be able to, put such things in a book like this. So I didn't include stuff like that, but I included a lot of emails. I think there was, I don't know, maybe 80 pages of emails, and we'll get to that in a minute. So anyway, my processing of the pages was involved in centering the pages. They were all crooked, and then they went to the edge, which I couldn't really print them right to the edge here because you got a gutter here and that you couldn't see. So I had to kind of center the pages and process them in that way, clean them up. And then I also merged some pages together that were 2 pages. Rather than have so many pages, I put 2 things so I condensed the lines a bit, stuff like that. And usually I would make a little note on the bottom saying if I ever changed the actual page, I would have a little editor's note within brackets. So then so this book would actually be 10 or 15 pages longer if I didn't do that. So then I also corrected a couple of mistakes. I didn't change mistakes. I provided information on the page about it. And then in one case I drew another schematic of it corrected. So there's a page which I talked about in one of the last videos where Don he copied something out of a book for the inverter, and then he just had the polarity backwards. It's interesting, in the book, or in the video, he actually points to the terminal in the right polarity. He talks about it in the right polarity, but in the schematic it was reversed. So I pointed that out, and then I provided a separate page that actually had it properly inverted. So yeah, transcribing the videos and audio was a very difficult task, and there's going to be some mistakes in there. I mean, I was doing that up until this morning, trying to go over the videos again and again, but I just kind of ran out of time. So I think some of the later videos might have a couple more typos here and there, and I found a couple more things after I finished this. So there'll be a few little things here and there, but nothing significant. So the purpose and the result I talk about, and then where and how to begin. So I've already kind of addressed that a bit. So then the introduction goes over the reasons why people fail, the obstacles in the way of over unity energy harvesting, and then the most important statement of all is that useful energy is defined as that which is other than ambient, and that is more profound, comprehensive than you would think, and that this whole book will be an illustration of that. Then the electron spin, the electron cycling, what is fundamentally wrong with generators, the homework assignment, the difference between over and under unity generators, block wall interrupting magnet generator, conventional power system, grid compared with dawn system, the free energy harvesting requirements, Kirchhoff's laws for the birds, I have a whole page on that. And then just different other devices. I'm not going to get into everything that's in this book, in this video here. So then key important statements by Don is the next section. Well, before that, I compare other existing technologies and other old patents with Don's system, which is really helpful to understanding all these systems. Anyway, the next one is the quotables. I got 6 pages of quotables, which on the back I have just some of them, which is really, you'll really like that. They're very important summary statements that I felt needed to have their own area to focus on. So I've arranged those to be I grouped them together in similar arrangements. So then I get into the beginning of the book. So after 66 pages, we start the book with the actual printed handouts that he gave. And there's 144 pages, which again would be about 15 more pages. Well, there's a couple of pages in there that are maybe 8 pages, 6 or 8 pages from Alex. As I said before, it was because of Alex Cobb that, Kolb, or how do you say the last name, that provided all these materials here that made this book possible, or made it important to do. After I got all those materials, Alex provided that it became very important for me to do that. So we'll look at these. Some of these are extra books that. So you can see here I have these are the actual books that you could have bought from Don. That's something else. So here's another one. Here's another one. This one appears to be a copy of the other one, but again, there's some pages missing, and one here and some over there. And if you listen to Don in the videos, he talks about how the from one year to another he put more or less things, and one time the bookstore took all the things out of his briefcase and photocopied it, which included these technical pages, and he had some handwritten notes on there that were important. So there's about 4 pages like that, and again, I've included it all in the 144 pages. But the only other pages, like I said, that were part of Alex. This is one of Alex's pages, and there's another one. So what happened is these are very important pages from videos that we don't have, like from lectures that were videoed, which I haven't found those videos yet. And so all we have is Alex's notes on there, which are important. There's details in there, especially about the block wall interruptible magnet motor. All the details about that motor are in this book now. So some of them come from those notes, and there's 2 videos if people want to find it. If they want to find that guy Chris, he's in Manhattan, who did the books, or the videos. And I'll show you the one video that we do have from this guy Chris. I can't remember his last name. Where is it? Right here. Oh, you can't, there's no cover on this one. But anyway, 1998, there was 3 videos, and this was the office video. So you can hear this guy Chris interviewing Don for 45 minutes. And that's this video, which is on YouTube. It's been on there for a while. But that's all the videos I uploaded, except for I think one, were from this set here. They're my videos that I processed and digitized, so it's different than somebody else's video. There are some mistakes in having, you'll find in at least one of the videos that there's a big gap, that I have a 5-minute period of nothing going on. So, but anyway, those are the videos. But the 98 video, there was 3 of them put out, and the other 2 are pertaining to that motor. So they were, according to the information about the videos, they were important videos. So I'd love to see them. I haven't been able to locate this guy. And Don said in 2005 that there was at least 12 or more videos floating around, and many others that people privately took. So, I mean, I'd definitely be interested if people find more information, but I don't think we need any more. You can see he covered so many things within the emails, especially. He covered so many details about miscellaneous subjects. So, and again, you don't need to know all those other details. All you need to know is the core thing, and that's reinforced again and again and again. So anyway, another filler word, phrase, so anyway. What we were talking about was the book itself is 144 pages, and many of these pages you will not have seen unless you have all these books. And I think some of them may only have been given to Alex, because Alex was a friend of Don, was in his house, and I started off the book with actually an image of Don's signature. My friend Alex, Don Smith. So he was his friend, and I wanted to point that out. So there's a lot of details in this book beyond the PDF online. So you're going to find that there's more than a third more material maybe than what's been floating around the internet. And then when you add in all the other content from the emails, there's probably double the amount of information that people readily know about. I mean, you could try and go through thousands of emails like I did and find all these emails individually. Good luck. I mean, I spent weeks doing that, so it was a very tedious process. So then, from there we have the Don Smith original website, and I have it all, and somebody has put up the website again. I don't know who they are. Just recently I found that they did it. But I went through the Wayback Machine, you can find all that. So I have all that in color in this book. So it's the same quality as you'd find on the internet. And actually have images that are of better quality than the ones on the internet from the book here. I've got color images. So that is 20 pages worth of full, like I have multiple images on the pages of the different models and the website. So we started off with the website, device number 1, 2, 3 as my beginning list, and then I continued it on. So then from there, so we have the website, all the website details, and then I go into the transcripts, and then almost all of the videos I have a supplementary diagram that nobody's drawn up yet. So I'm going to be the first one to have done that, drawn it out, and then carefully noted all the details. So you can go to the end of that particular section and follow along with the details. And then what I've included in some cases is actual screenshots of the video, and I kind of made it larger in that, like I got the best screenshot, which is, I'm working with very poor resolution screen to begin with, so I had to go frame by frame and find the best frame to take the shot of, but I included, color. And these are very important things that for a split second was shown and he went on to another slide, or he picked up the device and now you can see it. So all those mysteries are solved. There's nothing really hidden here. The only thing that you have to learn is the frequency adjustment, which he tells you how to do it, and dealing with the ground connection. I really explained that in this book, but that was the point, that people looked at the device but they didn't understand the ground connection, therefore they didn't know how to use the device at all. And Don did cover himself, he did explain himself. So people who say, well, Don didn't make enough detail, didn't say enough, well, I disproved that. So this is a vindication of Don. This is telling you that Don did more than probably everybody else combined in free energy research. That might be an exaggeration, but I think he really deserves the credit. And I'm just amazed at how people have passed over this. That's why I felt like I had to do this. So anyway, you go through 7 videos and 1 audio, and I have, again, all these commentary notes, either commentary or just telling you what's happening in that particular video. So if you want to decide, hey, I just want to read through this and see which video I want to look at, again, one of the most important things is my contribution of these 2 videos from Alex is the most important contribution so far in this, because those 2, video 1 and video 2 as I call it, 1994 and 1995 video, are the foundation for the rest of the videos. And you don't really get all the rest of the videos until you understand him presenting those first 2 videos. And so there's a lot of important content in there, and that's why it was very important to transcribe it as well. So from there, we go into the emails, and so we have quite a bit of emails here. And then we get into the systematic index. And so this whole idea of seeing the system that he had in the form of modules. So this is where he stressed this point that when he said he had 200 different setups, he actually clarified that later on in saying that there was these modules. So these were interchangeable between various systems. And he said, you got to really think in those terms. Build this module, and that's where he had these little neon bulbs at the beginning or the end of these various setups, so he could see that they're working, right? And then, they all go together as a puzzle. I mean, you got to think of the whole thing as an organic whole, but he also said that you need to do that. So this is where the idea of the systematic index came from. The idea of, well, part of the index is, so the index itself is going over these major important points like the historical development, the Don Smith's electron theory. I've taken all of his, almost all of the quotes on electron theory and specifics and put them together in consecutive order as they appear in the book. And then they're all in one section so that you can go through it all and not miss any point, instead of having to try and find where he said this and that by going through a basic index and then figuring out where it is and then having to sort through that. It's all there, back to back, boom, boom, boom. And you can see how it overlaps in that. So then I go over types of over-unity, proofs of over-unity, elucidations of over-unity, and then comes to the heart and the purpose of this book is that sectional processes of over-unity systems. And so I initially had 6, and you could have more or less categories here, but I made 5 categories of understanding the different parts of an over-unity system, which you've heard me say over the years. You have 3 or 4 different processes necessary. You have the agitation stage or disruptive discharge stage, which is really your exciting the electrons, and you're creating a difference between ambient and so a potential. So then you have the collection phase. Now that you've made this disturbance, you got to collect it. And then thirdly, you've got to transform it so that it's usable. So the transformation, utilization being the third stage. So I've made 5 different specific stages in here in which it's very helpful to think in those terms, because as I've made my own notes and I've taken all the Don Smith diagrams and put them together on a master page, which is not included in this book, that's proprietary for me, and everybody needs to do that if they're really going to be serious about this. So then you have these processes in which kind of overlap with modules. And they're not exactly like one module may be doing like 2 of these processes, or part of the process might linger over to 2 different modules and so forth, but they generally kind of fit in the whole module mindset, and that's really important for really succeeding in building these things successfully. And again, once you go through this whole book, everything will make sense, in which, and it will be really neatly organized for you so that you can just, you don't even have to take a lot of notes. They're already there, already done for you, and then you can just use this and go right directly to the point. So this is a way, again, of getting all these comments that he made into those sections. So now you can go and, okay, this is what he said on those sections. Now, it wasn't exhaustive because it was such a tedious process. I had to hold 20 trains of thought in my mind at the same time. And so sometimes you just overlook something and it's not going to be there, but they're sufficient enough to get the idea. And again, there'll be repetition in that. But it's very helpful, because what was he talking about when he talked about wave shaping? This is, here's the comments that he's made about it. So then he talks about devices, materials, tools, and calculations. These are all categories where I put all the comments together. Benefits of magnetic resonance, consequences of under-unity systems, where conventional theory is mistaken, hindrances to over-unity, and why replicators fail. And then I have a bibliography. So I've included his bibliography and I put it all together in one place. And then I've also added another page with actual links to PDFs online of these old books from like 1948 or 1928. So now the page with the trumpet wave that you can't see the writing, I have that, and then I actually include the PDF in here for that. And then the index, now the last part of the book, the index is a glossary index. So it's, again, it's not like a regular index, and I didn't do this with, the programs or anything. I actually hand wrote all these out. So what I do is I take these important words and phrases, and sometimes I have a whole paragraph. Like on his electron, when he talks about electron, I include like a whole paragraph sometimes. So it's very important that and it's his words. These aren't my words. And that's the whole thing with this book, is this is Don speaking. This is not me putting my theory into it at all. In fact, I'm not doing really anything like that. Even my diagrams are describing what he was communicating, and actually it's filled with his own words. So these index glossary are his definitions, his words, and that's very helpful because they all have, you can go to the page numbers. So you have the regular index, which is, I think, 14, 15 pages long, so that's quite extensive. And then you've got the systematic indexes, table of contents. So all these are helps organized in a way that makes it clear. And then all these blank pages just to make the book thick enough to make it look more impressive. No, that's the thickness, as they said, that the book will be, because the pages will be thicker than these pages. So I'm really excited about this. On the other hand, I'll say this as a real downer statement here, because I'm a realist. I think maybe 2% of the people that will ever buy this book will ever do something with it, just because there's such a mental block today with people. So that will maybe inspire some of those people to perk up and make those a higher statistic. But I just don't think people are capable of doing anything anymore. That's why I stressed so much at the beginning, having a proper foundation where you know how to process things. And we can just see this, and this is kind of a off topic now, and I'm going to talk about some upcoming products and parts in a minute. So if you get offended by this, realize that you're going to miss some other points. But just what's happened in the last couple of weeks with this whole Kavanaugh thing. I did a 3.5-hour video on it, and I just deleted it because so I'm just going to make a couple comments here. In relation to this, there's a parallel in that what we're talking about prejudice. Now, I'm no Kavanaugh supporter. I wouldn't have voted for him because he supports the Patriot Act, and he was a Bush neocon type of individual, so I am no sympathizer of Kavanaugh. But the whole thing that happened with him, where people assumed that he did something without a shred of evidence, is quite revealing and disturbing to me. Anyway, it's not whether he really did something or didn't. It's the idea of entertaining an allegation at all, which is ridiculous. Now, how that relates to what I'm getting at is people reveal that they don't have a shred of common sense or of a foundation, and of course they wouldn't allow those things to be done to themselves. In other words, they exercise freely their judgment against other people, but as soon as somebody else were to hurl the accusations at them, then they would deny their right to be able to do that. And so that's the hypocrisy of all this. Now, the hypocrisy with these political individuals are on both sides. I mean, you've got the hypocrisy of the Trump camp, where Trump verbally admitted to bragging about being able to grope women and do whatever he wants to women. I mean, that's the most unbelievable statement that anybody would have ever voted for him. Is beyond my imagination because of that. But it was, people voted for a lesser evil, and they're getting what they wanted, I guess. But there is no integrity anymore. This is, I can think, the whole reason for all of this to happen, and putting two grossly immoral, lying individuals as your only choices to vote for, it demoralizes the whole country. But it's a representation of the country, and that's my point here, is people don't know how to do anything but follow their camp that they belong to. They're not original in their thinking, so they're prejudiced. They prejudge matters, and you can't do that with this technology either. You can't come into this with a whole bunch of baggage. And Don touches on this. It almost sounds sarcastically, but he said in the video 3, for example, in '96, he said, I came to this meeting with the whole, he starts off the whole meeting saying, I came here to show, boil it down to just a light switch, because that's really what, it became clear that people only wanted. And that's fair enough that people maybe don't want to have to learn all this before they can use and benefit from the technology. And I've done that already with the motor systems. You don't really have to learn all the motor systems. They're essentially plug and play, and you can have your free energy there. So it's not as if I have been holding back on that either. But Don was addressing that in a paragraph, and then he comes back to it later on in the video, and he said, and that's the truth is that most people in America, they just need a light switch that they turn, like a switch that turns it on and off, and that's all they're capable of doing. Even I'm talking about engineers here. We're not even talking about people not familiar with electrical systems. We're talking about somebody is just not capable of following instructions, and it's sad. And I really want to spend the rest of my life helping people build a proper foundation and come to rational conclusions about things, legitimate conclusions. And I think what we have is a culture of willy-nilly where everybody is unsettled deep down in their hearts because they don't know how to process truth. And so they end up over or under believing things. And that's going to be the subject of the next book that I do in the next year. And so there's no insult in saying that. I find myself very lacking as well. And so I have some problems with my my learning abilities aren't the same as everybody else, and I have to struggle. My eyesight was a big problem in regards to that, and it's a special problem. Anyway, it takes me a lot longer to learn things, and I have to focus in. So I'm not claiming any kind of superiority over anybody, and I want to go back and again build my foundation even more before I write this book. And I think that's so important today, and we can always do more of that. But going back to Don, he talked about in Eastern Europe, these guys were building these things. Why? Because first of all, they were more desperate. They were poorer people for the most part, and they were not prejudiced. They were more than willing to follow instructions. They didn't have anything to prove to somebody else. They just wanted to do it. And so they went at it, and he said there was hundreds of replicators. And I've actually seen the solid state DOM systems where you literally just have, it looks like an inverter, because it is an inverter, and you have some electronics and you have a big cable going to the ground. And that's what he talked about, and they did that over there, and I've seen it. That's the modern version. These are the 100-year-old versions of it, of the processes. But it's no joke over there. They know this stuff works. They use it, and you can even find a few videos online here and there, but they're not going to have any high view count on YouTube. So anyway, that's the Don Smith book. That's the rationale for it, and so forth. And I was talking about the political rant there for a bit. So just a couple other thoughts on that. So you got the Me Too movement. I thought, well, we could maybe invent the Him Too movement. So I came up with this idea of the Him Too movement. Lo and behold, I think the same time that I came up with it, somebody else did too. And now it's all over Twitter. I'm not on Twitter. I would never want to be on Twitter because maybe it's for twits or something like that. But so you have the Him Too is just as legitimate as the Me Too because it's the same thing. So you say I'm a survivor. I'm personally a survivor. I've never been sexually assaulted to my memory, but I have been definitely. I've experienced things that are far worse than sexual assault, and I'm not belittling that. I know firsthand, very close to me, people who have been sexually assaulted, and and that is a horrible thing to go through. But there are worse things to go through, and I've gone through them. And so I am a victim and a survivor myself. And it's a horrible thing. But it's also a lot worse to be on the side of being accused of having done something because somebody believes the initial allegation, and the other person is having to prove their innocence. And this is dreadful. That somebody who brings an allegation has to have proof. And actually, if you're going to if you're going to be an upright person, you should never make an allegation unless you have some basis for it. To actually put upon somebody a claim without any substantiation whatsoever is immoral. It's expecting somebody to believe you based upon no reason but your own verbal claim is, especially a negative against another person, is actually slander, even if it is true. Now that might blow people away in their minds by saying, well, hey, I know it happened and I'm going to say it. Well, what are you expecting somebody to do? Are you expecting them to believe you based upon what? Now, if you know the person individually and whatever, but I'm talking to a stranger, you're making an allegation and you don't have any, and you know you have nothing to support it. This is a very dangerous practice, and it pertains to these free energy claims as well. If you go around saying, hey, I can do this or I can do that, this is possible, what you're doing is you're encouraging people to believe something and become incredulous or credulous. Somebody who's believing something before they ought to. You know, this is an extremely dangerous practice, which is the whole foundation of the modern educational system, is encouraging a tabloid mentality where you are just either pontificating or you're deciding to believe whatever you want to believe, create your own reality. And this is the destruction of our society. You know, it's contrary to all law. And, oh, well, Kavanaugh's case was just a matter of a job. No, it wasn't. We're talking about this man losing his life, right? So we're talking about somebody who gave all appearance of being playing by all the rules and being at the top of the spectrum in that example, and being the guy deserves some honor for the life that he has exemplified, and that wasn't given. So it's not acceptable to do that sort of thing. And again, the same thing can be applied to Don Smith and people making claims about him, which is what I address in the book as well, in that some people have attacked him on baseless, So, anyway, just to finish up that little rant on that is, if you have a claim isn't justifiable, you need to have a sufficient reason to bring up a claim. And if you don't have it, then what can you expect? In fact, the Republicans were just as much to blame as the Democrats in this whole fiasco. They should have been people of integrity and say, this is an unsubstantiated claim. It has no basis for being even entertained, which is the outcome of what it all ended up being anyway. In the end, there was no substance to it. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't any substance, because all we have is what's been presented to us. You and I aren't in a position to judge the matter because we don't have the ability to go and dive into things. Now, we can see contradictory statements from people and evaluate their claims, I suppose, in that regards. But the point is that if you have an allegation about somebody and it's not substantiated whatsoever, then it's hearsay. and it shouldn't be entertained at all. And it can't be in a court of law. You cannot have, if there's no, what they were mocking about, there wasn't any time, date, location, and the corroborating evidence is against it, then you can't even begin an investigation. There's no basis for it. Because if you open that door, then you open the door to any possible thing. We already have a situation where it's so out of hand. So, it's a sad reality that in this world, it's not going to be perfect. We're going to be wronged, and people are going to get away with doing wrong things. In the next life, we're all going to give an account for every action. But in this life, it's not perfect, and it's unfortunate, and we need to do more to address real claims. And I'm not against that, but this idea of attacking somebody without basis and creating tabloid is despicable, and it's ruined. I hope I don't offend anybody with that, but I'm not coming from an angle of one side or the other here. I'm just talking about the bare facts. So I think I can project ahead that this is a clear attempt to put in check the Me Too movement, which definitely needs to be put in check. You have people coming out, men and women, saying that like we believe survivors, like you just believe anybody who claims to be one. Well, you don't understand psychologically. I mean, I was working in mental health for years, and I happen to know very close up people who have played the victim and played it very successfully. And I think Bedini was somebody like that who played the victim successfully and drew sympathy from people. But I've seen other people, men and women, do this, where they play the victim and they enlist sympathy, and people believe it, but there's no actual evidence purported, and this is a very dangerous practice. So, you have to be careful about what you believe in. It definitely ties into what we're dealing with. So, a couple of things. We'll end off with the new accessories we're going to add for these kits, and the projection of where we're going with all this research in the next year or so. But one thing that came up, and I didn't really have time to include much of it in the new book, but I did give a reference to this book called Earthing. It's called, the subtitle is The Most Important Health Discovery Ever. Clinton Ober, Martin Zucker. And so a friend of mine had this book and recommended it. I haven't read it through yet, but was really interesting. The whole concept of grounding in this book is essential. It's a very important point. And I did get a chance to go over all the dangers and worries, cautions, I should say, that I wanted to, because I kind of ran out of space, and I had set my page numbers, and I was limited to what I could include in my introduction. So what I want to do is say in this video a little bit more. So you have the main system pulls electrons from the ground, and this is where the amperage comes, as Don Smith talks about. So it finally kind of came together in this last year, this whole concept of both on the amplification of energy perspective and also the danger perspective. So what I want to talk about is without a proper ground connection to the earth ground, you're going to be, if you create any kind of process like this, you're going to be pulling in electrons from the air. The air is also a ground. And so you're pulling in electrons, and with the earth ground, you have a really rich source of electrons. We get in that in this book, to some degree, but Don's book gives a lot more specifics about the whole cycle and how that's important. Anyway, this is one reason why people have failed in their replications is they're not properly understanding the potentials, that the ground is this kind of the reference 0 point, foundation upon which you are creating a difference from, and that specifically refers to the movement of the electrons and then their spin and so forth. So if you're not pulling electrons from a ground, if you have a Tesla coil or whatever that's not grounded, then what's happening is you are ending up pulling the electrons from the air, and they're also going to be pulling from your own body. And this is where it's a very bad health situation. So I actually had somebody that was demonstrating the Tesla coil with the ground the proper way, which was actually distributing electrons out in a healthy way. And that's the way the Tesla did it. And then he warned me not to do that, or to, unless I knew what I was doing. And so about 4 years ago or so, I made some Tesla coils, and you can still see the image of the one of on the convention page. And so actually we lit all the light bulbs, the 20-foot long fluorescent tubes based on like 1 watt of input of the Tesla coil. And so we were doing an over unity demonstration in that. But I had 2 wives of these men, they're friends of mine, that went to the meeting, and they were like really ill the next couple of days. And I know these men were really unhealthy people. Anyway, so I don't know if that had a contribution factor, but they told me this, their wives. They didn't, the men didn't tell me, the wives did. And I realized that even though I was running it only for a couple of minutes, that it had that effect of pulling the electrons from your body. And so this is a really important matter with proper grounding. Your Faraday cage being, being grounded, and the system itself being grounded. And so you can have an air ground, you can have a frame ground, but again, we're dealing with all the electrons on this particular, system, and we're going to be using them in a various way, the right way or wrong way. So this earthing deals with that biologically. So it's talking about the importance of what we've lost with our rubber sole shoes now. We're no longer grounded like we used to be, and the animals are grounded. They lay on the ground, and you pull in electrons. What happens when you go to the beach, for a vacation? You put your feet in the sand and you just feel rejuvenated. Well, it's not just the energy from the sun, it's you're pulling in the energy from the ground, the way you were made to receive it. So this is something that I think is very important. It pertains directly to what we're dealing with. I just thought I would mention it in more detail. I can't make this video too much longer, so I'll have to move on. So again, we are dealing with resonance. And I was going to say more about these, this one image here that I made up. So I have this here that gives you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 points. And then, so we're talking about how the electrons spin. This is a very important concept. So I was going to put it right on the cover. I only did it right here on the 8 here. I never really got a chance to play around with the image. I ran out of time. But this electron spin is the most important thing in this book. I said that several times, so I've contradicted myself by saying the most important. So there are several things that are the most important, I guess, and it's hard for me to evaluate. When I think about it, I think that particular point is the most important. Then when I go over to another point, that seems to be at the moment the most important point. So there are several most important points, I suppose. Like people say, what's your favorite color? And I've got two favorite colors, so what can you say? So you've got the electron spin, you've got the concept of a transmitter, then you've got a concept of the wave continuing on through a coil. This is very important. I've talked about in the past with my multiple, this is the kind of mystery point in this book that you're supposed to figure out. One of them is that you can add as many coils as you want and they can repeat the process and the wave can go right through them, right? So this is a major point of free energy that Don talked about in his Model 2, which is the first model that he built. It's called number 2 for some reason instead of number 1, but this is the one with the several Tesla coils, several receiver coils around the main Tesla coil. And he says you can add as many as he wants. And so we talk about having the wave actually keep on going through the one to the next one to the next one to the next one. Now, the angle of distance, the angle, this is where the square laws come. So this is the transmitter, say this L1 here, and then the waves go out, and so as they go out, they don't get weaker, just the angle of reception gets narrower and narrower. So it's not that you can't receive the same energy from one wave to another with multiple coils, which is what we've shown with these kits, but the angle cuts off. But the good news is you could have coils all around, like on my little kit here, I can put at least 100 coils right around the near field, right in the really close near field. 100 coils, each receiving the same amount of energy, and none of them are impacting each other in a negative way. Each one being tuned together can all receive, right? So I have 100 times the energy from if we look back to, and I exposed that in this first book, the MIT demonstration where they said, here's a transmitter, here's a receiver coil here, resonance, and they're saying we got 40% of the energy recovered over here, like 10 meters away or something. But they didn't say to you that you could multiply, 100 of those coils around, and each one of them receive the same amount of energy, right? But then you have, from that point on, is another concept of then also you can have the concept of a repeater coil. So now you can have all those 100 coils, and not only does the wave go through them, but they in turn, when the electrons flip, they in turn give off another wave. So they are another transmitter. So now you could add more coils around them, not just that are receiving the original transmission of waves, but now we're talking about these receiver coils becoming transmitters as well. And then we can add that. So I demonstrated that at the last convention where I had just one cross section of coils. And so you had, say a coil out here, and here's the transmitter, and it was more faint out here because the angle was less. It was receiving less waves to it than if it was over here, right? But when I put another coil here, then this lit it up more. The load was powered more. And this load was full, and this one became full, and it actually only ended up bringing down the input into the transmitter. And so we went down to like 20 milliamps, you know, and we were powering all these things, you know, at just one cross section. So the idea of a repeater coil, there's two aspects. One, that you can broadcast abroad, but now you can also, this transmitter can be locked in with the primary transmitter, and they can have a sympathetic resonance, and that's one of the main themes of this book, where you are locking in, and it's a give and take symbiotic relationship, and you can have a phase conjugate mirror experience there, where it's going back and forth, and so they can actually feed themselves, like those bridges that we talked about in the past, going in resonance, and the people walking are feeding the bridge, and the bridge is feeding people, and they're just locked together. And so actually in my last meeting I showed in California, I got it, like we were going to show all these, well, we actually showed it over the lunchtime. I didn't get around to demonstrating it to everybody, but I had one of my bigger coils, right, that I only have at the meetings, and it was running again off of milliamps. And when I actually had all these coils around powering, I ended up putting these ferrite rods, which we're going to make these available. We already make them available for the crystal radio additional parts, but we're going to make them available with wire, and you can wind them yourself. So that will be on the website shortly. That's what I wanted to talk about after this. But anyway, so when I added these extra loads, because these had loads on it, there was such a lock between the transmitter and the receivers. There was a lock there that I just happened to tune into, in which they were feeding each other, and I couldn't break that lock. Even when I applied additional loads internally, usually when you add a ferrite, it changes the frequency requirements of the tuning. So it didn't, because I had such a strong connection there that I was able to load upon load upon load, and that's what Don was doing in these systems, where he was getting into that kind of connection. And so when I loaded it down, actually the amperage went down, the input as well. So that's when I went down to like 20 milliamps, and everything was still powered just like it had been. So those are two important points where you can very easily with these kits produce as much energy as you want by just multiplying parts out, and just recognizing that these magnetic streams that are normally being wasted, you know, we can look at that with the Gauss meter and determine that this little device here is putting out an enormous amount of magnetic energy. And remember, in a transformer, it's from primary to secondary, it's only magnetic flux that's transferring in an isolation transformer. There is no electrical connection at all. So when you realize that, you just simply make a collector, just like a secondary of an isolation transformer is. You're just going to collect that energy some way or another, and then transform it and use it. So this is what we're going to be doing with these various kits, is adding, and we have a very special kit coming up that is, I'm going to offer it for $150. I'm just going to say it's going to be a Benitez kit, and it's going to incorporate this kit coil, and it's going to incorporate all these different systems in one. And so we're going to have that in the next, month and a half or so, and I'll probably take orders on it as soon as I've figured out all the costs of the parts and all that. But that is going to tie a lot of these things together, because it's going to be a resonance system, and it's going to be doing some of these things. And we're going to do also, we're going to add to Benitez's system the receiver coils, which he didn't ever show anything like that. So we're going to add some more elements, and we're not going to have the regular interrupter that is such a problem that wears out. So anyway, these are the kinds of concepts that we talk about in this book. Then there's another form of gain, like on this page, is where you have resonance. And so you have a Q factor, just like this. This is ringing thousands of times. And so we're multiplying the energy out again and again, both in the transmitter and in the receiver coils. And so that's another form of gain. Every wire strand in these wires is a gain. I've got 2-gauge wire with 2,600 strands of wire, and I'm not showing anybody that, but that's the equivalent of many Hoover dams of output on that kind of system. When you think about the square laws, and when you're remembering that concept, is every wire strand, even though they're not isolated or insulated from each other, with the skin effect at radio frequency, the resonance systems, they travel outside the wire, the electrons and so forth. So they are multiplying the energy around each wire individually. So when I actually run these things, I create these massive arcing like you wouldn't believe. So resonance itself and the magnetic streams or waves, the going up in voltage also relates to this multiplying the square laws. Actually, the cube, it's a cube, not actually a square. So the energy goes up into the millions very quick-like, as Don would say. Quick-like. So anyway, I covered what I wanted to cover there. And what we want to get into is we'll be doing fairly shortly these. This week I'll probably start selling these. I just got to catch up with all the orders. I apologize for delays, but I've been doing this book. It's the most important thing I've ever done for free energy research, and I just had to do it, and people have had to wait, unfortunately, for the book and for a couple other orders that will start going out next week. But we'll want to do some other things. We're going to wind some of the coils in some different configurations to apply what's in this book, and then we'll be doing some hydrogen stuff as well, and we'll go from there. We'll just see. So I want you to understand that none of these kits are going to be obsolete. They will all, even the old motors, will be doing the same things with the motors as well. We're going to be integrating the ground systems with the motors, which very few people know about that, but it's all applies. So the motors are all relevant, and these resonant kit is even more and more relevant. And again, the importance of the kit is that it's at a safe level. You don't want to start doing this level if you don't know what you're doing, because you're going to kill yourself. You're going to hurt yourself. And I can't stress that enough to not jump into the unknown. It's dangerous, very dangerous, and you may not feel something happen, but you could do some serious damage without even realizing it. Like you could literally cook your organs like a microwave. So you have to really know what you're doing, but that's where this little kit makes it safe, and you can still do some damage to yourself. And this is one reason why I never said in the book any reference at all to an earth ground, because that's where the amperage comes in. I assume that people would figure that out from what I said in there, but I have to protect myself from liability, and I don't want anybody to ever get hurt. So that's the first rule. Safety is the first rule. It always has been with me. So you're not to do any of these things unless you're qualified, unless you have the ability to have the experience and conform to local code and what have you. it's your responsibility. This, I will call it entertainment purposes, these videos. Therefore, whatever you want to do with them legitimately. So what I'm saying is you have to be careful, and even with the little kit, when you start doing what I show in this new book with the grounding, what Don showed, you could have very significant power output. You could power with the little kit more than you realize. And I don't even want to say what you can actually do with it, because people will just think I'm being ridiculous. But if you understand resonance and you understand actually how the system works, remember the voltage and amperage are equal, and the watts is determined by the load that you're using. So that is something you have to wrap your brain around. But this book gives you the ability to finally understand really what that means. So it's not that Don didn't say it. I'm just organizing all the thoughts there. So let's see, is there anything else I wanted to say? The things are coming up soon. I'm going to be plowing into it this fall, really enhancing this. So we're going to have the Arduino board is going to have it's going to be a kit finally. We're going to make a board for the top of the Arduino that is a printout, so that I don't have to do it for you, that you can make it yourself. You can assemble it yourself and bring the cost down. But we're going to be using that in several of these upcoming things. So I'll do videos updating these things as I come. Look at my website and you'll see r-charge.com or .net, and Renaissance Charge is the company. Alethean Heart is my publishing company, and that's where we're publishing these books through. And they will be sold on Amazon. You can pay a whole lot more on Amazon, or you can buy them directly through my website. And it's $120, and it's because it's a hardcover and it's a color. It costs a lot more money to make a color book, and there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in that book, so it's worth every penny. And I don't usually try and push something, but I believe after all these years, this is my work after all these years, and there's nothing more to it. This is the beginning and the end. These two go hand in hand. Again, Don recommends this kit. That's what it is. Oh, that was the other thing I was going to say. So the original papers for that kit, Alex sent those to me as well. We actually bought the kit. I can't reproduce those pages because they're copyrighted, but I will be doing something shortly that actually conforms to the original directions, which is actually pertaining to Faraday's laws, which I don't even actually get into in the resonance book. I kind of went right to the end result. So this is important, but it's a little bit boring for people. I'm going to try and bring some of these points out without violating any copyright, and I don't want to do that ever. So I will bring out some of these points, some of the equations. I just don't want people to get lost in equations, and that's what happens with so many things. People just, it becomes ambiguous for them once they can't really understand the equations or the basic ideas. But what I didn't include in this book is the basic idea of showing Faraday's law. And I think what I'll do is I'll have a printout with the kit from now on, where it's going to go over the bare bones of what you can do and walk away with something significant without having to plow through this resonance book. And that way, I actually made this for a bunch of my nephews that were very interested, and then my oldest nephew was like, oh, I can't make any sense of it, right? And he's like 31 or something. And, you know, you really have to spend some time and sit down and focus on it. And that's just not everybody has that kind of time. So what I want to do is create, just like maybe 7 pages of some basic experiments, some basic definitions, explanations, and then you can work through that. And if you never get to the rest of the book, that's fine. You can still really benefit from the kit and understand. Like, for example, so the main thing, and I talk about that in this book, I have a whole page on it. So Faraday's law is different than Kirchhoff's law or rule, in that Kirchhoff's law is part of Faraday's law, but the changing magnetic field, so if this was a magnet, the faster the rate of movement, the more you're going to get from the receiver coil, without trying to be technical at all. So if you have no changing magnetic field, you're not going to get any response in the coil. You might have a field, but if it's not like a magnet, if it's not moving, it's not going to do anything unless you get tuned into the really high frequency of the magnet, which is moving actually. And Don talked about that in this book. And that's another whole matter. So, which leads me, that's my last point I want to make and stress again, that once you realize that, this is what Tesla and Murray did at the end. Tesla realized that the galactic waves, which are really high frequency, you can tune into and just pull directly from that. In the same way as the solar panel. It's exactly the same as the solar panel. It's just a different frequency. And you can create these receivers fairly easy, and you can have enormous amount of energy. If you ever show that, you probably won't live very long. That's a very taboo thing. It's like anti-gravity, or it's like some of these things. Well, it's like me trying to sell this. If I tried to sell this system, if I even began to try it, you'd never see me again. So, there's a limitation in what you can share and do. But anyway, I kind of rambled off. Yeah. So when you learn that basic idea, and you learn how to do a frequency conversion, and you just learn how to use a transformer, you're good to go. That's all it is. And then the ground system. So yeah, so this is where we're at. We're going to give you some toys. I think we're going to be doing a 50-watt Benitez system, and you will be able to multiply that just like the coils. Well, you'll be having these coils too. So then you can, what I'm looking to do is having more complete systems that are, like, it'll have the battery swapper in it, all automatic, and then you'll be able to multiply it out so that you could like run every room if you needed 50 watts of light per room. You could just add one here, there, and there, and there, and you can just multiply it out as a light system. And you could of course make it bigger if you wanted to. So anyway, I think that's enough. It's a long video, and I appreciate the support people are at least verbally giving me, and some people have helped me with the book. Thanks to Bruno, he helped with this, and Jason, and especially for Alex, providing materials. And again, I'm still looking for more. Somebody can hunt down that Chris guy, who is the publisher of those videos. Some of you old guys have those videos. I know it, because Several thought they had it, they didn't, but find them for me and I'll properly process them and make them available. So anybody else have any more information, let me know. I don't think we need any more, but you never know what else is helpful. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you later.